We are undergoing tiny shifts and transitions all the time in this moment, right now, as you're listening and as I'm talking. Cells in us are dying, are regenerating. We are physically transitioning and changing in every moment. We just don't notice it. The clouds outside, the weather outside, the sun is changing and transitioning right now. We just don't notice it right now in this moment. So if we can find ways to shift our perspective on what change is and what we find to be acceptable or unacceptable change, we might actually see that we can move through it or face it with more confidence, courage, and clarity.
Welcome to the GenX Shift podcast, a show for Gen Xers who are navigating some pretty tough transitions and aren't sure how to move forward. I'm your host, Michele Walter, proud Gen Xer, former lawyer turned entrepreneur, huge Jason Momoa fan, and margarita snob. And I've navigated a lot of transitions in my life, from losing my mom suddenly to a heart attack to starting my own business. But I often did it all on my own because I was too stubborn to ask for help. Now I'm on a mission to give actionable strategies to other Gen Xers so that they can find the confidence, courage, and clarity they need to make a shift. So let's rock and roll.
Hey, Gen Xers, welcome back to the podcast this week. This is another solo episode that I felt compelled to share with y'all, following up on last week's episode about the difference between change and transition. So if you haven't caught episode 17 yet, I'll link that in the show notes. You might want to go back and listen to that first. This week is giving you some practical tips, actually 8 steps that you can use to move through transition and thus the bigger changes that we're all facing in life right now. So let me recap last week's episode just a little bit first, but I still encourage you to go back and listen to it for all the nitty-gritty details. Last week I shared 3 insights, 3 observations about change versus transition. And the first one is that there is a distinction between change and transition. Change are really the things that we notice in life where there is a distinct ending and a new beginning. They tend to be more abrupt, more stark, whereas shifts and transitions are the micro moments that make up the bigger changes in life. They're a little more subtle, maybe not so noticeable in terms of an ending and beginning. The second observation is that change is really what gets our attention most of the time. We don't often notice those more subtle shifts and transitions that are happening. And there are 2 kinds of changes that get our attention, voluntary and involuntary, pretty basic, right? The third observation I shared is that there are 3, in general, obstacles to change. There are more, but I'm just focusing on these 3. The first obstacle is uncertainty, which every human being hates. The second obstacle is cognitive dissonance. And the third obstacle was identity dissonance or identity change. So I left you last week with a little bit of a cliffhanger with those obstacles. So what the hell are you supposed to do with those obstacles? And how do you actually make any change in your life? And how do you start to focus on those smaller shifts and transitions? So that's what we're going to walk through this week with these 8 steps that I want to share with you. And of course, before we get into those, I want to invite you to download the freebie that's your guide to this week's episode. That's available at lifefromthesummit.com/podcast/18. So maybe pause the video or audio, go download that so that you can follow along and take some notes if you want. So let's move into this. A lot of this is scratching the surface on what could be their own individual podcast topic episodes. So please know that I'm just scratching the surface on some of this stuff because this is a lot of the deeper work that I've done for myself and for my clients. But I'm here to plant these seeds for you so you know that there is hope, that there is a way for you to move through these bigger life changes. And it starts with being able to focus on and make the smaller shifts in transitions. So the first step is to develop a mindfulness meditation practice. I know You might hear mindfulness all the time. You certainly hear me talk about it all the time, and there's a reason. Mindfulness is the gateway to being able to pay more attention to the shifts and transitions, those micro moments that end up making up the bigger changes in life. Mindfulness is misunderstood a lot. Again, I'm just scratching the surface here, but I want to have us start from a common foundation of what mindfulness is. And mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment without judgment. So I think of mindfulness, and I teach mindfulness as having 3 legs of a stool. And have you ever sat on a stool where one of the legs feels a little off or uneven, or maybe all of the legs are uneven and it's very wobbly? You don't feel like you're on solid ground. That's how we kind of move through life without mindfulness. We're kind of wobbly. We're not really on solid ground. So those 3 legs, coming back to the definition, are first of all paying attention. So focusing the mind, focusing the attention on what? The second leg is the present moment. We can pay attention to a lot of future worrying, a lot of past regret. We want to learn to focus in and pay attention to the present moment. But how do we do that? That's the third leg. We pay attention to the present moment with as much non-judgment and compassion as we can. And I say as much because we're human beings. We have these beautiful brains that love to judge and critique and problem solve and identify uncertainty, right? The invitation here is to start to notice the unsupportive or unhelpful judgments and thoughts that you are having, and to learn to bring in compassion, which is basically just kindness, which we need as little judgment as possible oftentimes in order to be more kind. So we're kind of holding things loosely. Doesn't mean that we don't problem solve or we don't have discernment. There's a difference between discernment and judgment. Judgment is based on the stories, beliefs, the attitudes, perceptions that we have learned and that have been ingrained in us throughout life. Discernment is really being able to sit back from a place of centeredness and groundedness, to be able to make a decision, to look between different options and be able to choose what feels most supportive for us. The reason that we want to adopt a mindfulness meditation practice, if we want to be able to move through transitions in our life with more ease so that we can make bigger changes, is that mindfulness provides us with a foundation to not only pay attention to the present moment with less judgment, but that means that we can start to develop more equanimity in our lives. Equanimity is the ability to stand in the middle of a storm in all the chaos and still feel grounded, centered, and resourced enough to be able to respond wisely instead of reacting unwisely. And when it comes to making a big change in life, like changing your job, dealing with aging parents, trying to get the kids off to college, these are all changes that we want to be able to bring a wiser response to instead of just reacting in knee-jerk fashion. So mindfulness is what helps keep us out of our mental control towers, keeps us out of the future worrying, the past regretting, keeps us grounded in the present moment. And it does so in a way that alleviates all the charged judgments we can have about ourselves or others in the situation by bringing us back into this place of equanimity, of groundedness, in holding things loosely. Now, being in the present moment, practicing equanimity, practicing a wise response, not judging, doesn't mean we just stand there like passive idiots and do nothing. It doesn't mean we don't have goals and a future plan or a path forward. I love the saying by Casey Kasem, remember, from the Top 40, where he would end every episode saying, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. That's what mindfulness is. You're trying to keep your feet on the ground in the present moment while still reaching ahead down the path toward that change or transition that you want to make, or toward having a different relationship with a change that has happened to you. So that's the first step, is to develop a mindfulness meditation practice. And of course, reach out to me if you want some help in doing that. The second step related to mindfulness is to develop self-compassion. Now, that's a phrase you don't hear Gen Xers uttering a lot, and it certainly wasn't one that we were raised with. All self-compassion really means is that we want to learn to be as kind and caring and nurturing to ourselves as we are to other people, especially people close to us, a good friend or a family member. There are 3 elements to self-compassion. Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer, whose information I'll post in the resource that you're going to get, the free guide, focus on these 3 elements. And it's having an awareness that you're experiencing something painful or challenging, right? Like being aware that this sucks. I don't like this change. The second element is to remember that all human beings experience pain. It's a common human experience. And so when we are experiencing something painful or challenging, it can be really easy to feel alone. Like we are the only person suffering through this. And while our particular circumstances are unique to us, the experience of pain is a common universal human experience. And so we can remember that we are connected, that we are not alone in our experience of pain. And then the third element is just to freaking be nice to yourself. Treat yourself as good as you would treat a really good friend or someone that you loved who was also experiencing that kind of pain. Why do you treat yourself like crap? Right? That's a whole podcast episode in and of itself. Understanding that you as a human being deserve just as much love and kindness and support as you would give to someone else going through something similar. The point, I hesitate to even call it that, but the point of self-compassion, why would you want to practice self-compassion as part of your change that you're experiencing, is that we know from studies that self-compassion actually creates resilience. It creates a lot of other things too. It decreases depression, increases our self-worth. At the bottom of all of that is that self-compassion creates more resilience. And God knows if you're going through some changes, you're going to need some more resilience. Okay, the third step is to know your why, which for me is your core values. It's not so much why am I going through this or why do I want to go through this? It's what do you want to honor through this change or transition? What do you want to stay true to? What do you want to align with? What is, as I call it, your North Star? Core values are your North Star. They give you guidance and direction for anything that you're facing in life, any decision, any transition or change. When you are plugged into and know your core values, it helps you to discern what path should I take? What action here feels more aligned for me? Feels like it would help me honor my value of freedom or my value of financial stability, whatever it might be. It gives you this filter to make decisions. And if you're facing a change that's either been done to you that you've experienced or that you want to make, there's going to be decisions that have to be made. And so understanding how you can ground yourself in your core values and say, okay, I know I want to honor and feel more freedom in my life because that's important to me. Does that mean that I'm staying in my current job or does that mean I want to quit my job? Now, this doesn't result in like a pros and cons list, and it doesn't always make a neat and clean decision. What it does allow you to do is choose with more awareness and consciousness what your next step is so that you don't feel like life is constantly being foisted upon you. It gives you conscious choice no matter what the external circumstances, because you can't change those external circumstances. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Regardless of whether you can change those external circumstances or not, you can have autonomy and responsibility over your response. And you can root that in honoring what is deeply important to you. What is your core value? I have a whole free inner compass audio series on discovering your core values and learning how to align with them. I'm going to link that in the show notes. So I encourage you to check that out and start to do that work for yourself. The fourth step is to adopt a growth mindset. I want to make a couple of distinctions here with some concepts. The first concept is the distinction between fixed mindset and growth mindset. A fixed mindset is something like, I'll never make any money, I'm always going to be broke. Or I could never run a 5K. I'll never get that job. I'm ugly. I'm fat. Like, fixed mindsets are static. They pigeonhole us into a certain identity or belief or label. Growth mindset takes us out of that static posture and moves us in the direction of growth, of expansion. So a growth mindset might look like, if the fixed mindset was, I'll never be able to run a 5K, the growth mindset could look like, I am someone who is learning to run and train for a 5K race. There's some important language I want you to notice there. The growth mindset was not, I'm a 5K runner. We hear a lot of affirmations like that, and I'm not dissing on those. And there can be some limitations or some potential obstacles in those, because once we latch onto an identity of, I'm a 5K runner, I'm a marathoner, or I'm a lawyer, whatever it might be, we're still kind of fixed. That's still a static kind of identity or mindset. It's not allowing for expansion or learning. And that's the key here, is that a growth mindset incorporates learning and feedback. So instead of saying, I'm a 5K runner, we say, I am someone who is learning to run and train for a 5K. Because then what happens if you wake up one day and you're late or the weather's crappy and you don't get out for your run? It's okay, because you can learn from that. You're still someone who is learning to be a 5K runner and train for a 5K. And you might learn, oh, I need to get up earlier, which means I need to go to bed earlier. Or, oh, I need to get some better rain gear so that I can run outside. If you had a fixed mindset and you said, I'm a 5K runner, and you miss a day or two of training, that creates cognitive dissonance. Remember, one of the obstacles to change from the week before? It creates cognitive dissonance or even identity dissonance, because all of a sudden it's like, I missed 2 days of training. Now I'm screwed. My whole plan is off. I'm not going to be able to run the 5K. So fixed mindsets are very limiting, and they don't allow us to adopt learning and so you want to adopt a growth mindset for whatever transition you're trying to make. Let me give you one for anybody facing a physical illness, for example, or who's been diagnosed with something recently. The fixed mindset is, I'm never going to be able to walk again. I'm never going to be able to go up a flight of stairs again. I'm never going to hike again. Those are fixed mindsets that may feel true based on your external circumstances or the observable facts. And you can still adopt a growth mindset in the midst of that. So you can say something like, I am someone who is learning to adapt to a more stationary or sedentary lifestyle. I am someone who is learning to hike in a different way. I am someone who is learning to embrace my new physicality. So simply because your external circumstances may dictate some particular facts doesn't mean you can't have a growth mindset in the midst of that. The second concept I want to give you here that's under this fourth step of adopting a growth mindset is moving from the comfort zone to the growth zone. So we love to be in our comfort zone. Why? Because it's comfortable. Feels good. It's what we know. Even when we're not so happy, even when we're miserable, we still stay in our comfort zone because it's what we know. And why is that important? Remember back to last week's episode, it helps us avoid uncertainty. We like our comfort zone because it's certain, even when it sucks. That's why change can be so challenging when we've been stewing in our comfort zone for a long time. We know that comfort zone well, and we know our misery well. This is why the saying, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know, holds true. We would rather stay in our misery because it's comfortable and known than to take a step outside into the unknown. So, just outside the comfort zone, if you can think of these as sort of connecting circles, just outside the comfort zone is the fear zone. A lot of fear, a lot of unknown outside the growth zone, right? Or, excuse me, outside the comfort zone. So, we stay in the comfort zone because I don't want to face the fear. No, I'll stay here. If we can learn, and this we'll get to one of the steps later, if we can learn to take a little tiny step outside the comfort zone toward that fear, we can start to build evidence for ourselves that, oh, I can face the fear. That's okay. That wasn't so bad. And then outside the fear zone is the learning zone. And these aren't necessarily linear. We can still be kind of learning in the fear zone or learning before the fear zone. Like, it's a very fluid process. But there's this learning zone where we're starting to learn new information about the world around us, about our skill sets, about ourselves, our abilities, substantive knowledge, different topics. And that learning can help assuage some of that fear and can help encourage us to want to move outside the comfort zone. And then ultimately we move into the growth zone. And pretty soon, your new growth zone also becomes your new comfort zone. So this process isn't linear. You might move into the fear or learning zone and something happens and you're like, oh shit, I'm going back into retreating back into the comfort zone. Retreat. That's okay. It's a fluid process. The key is to continue to take tiny steps, which we'll talk about in a second, into the fear and learning zones so that you can eventually develop into the growth zone. And critical to that is having a growth mindset so that the whole time you are someone who is learning to XYZ. So growth mindset and growth zone are very much tied together, and you want to be able to adopt a growth mindset to move you from your comfort zone to your growth zone. All right, the fifth step, as cheesy as this sounds, I really want you to figure out what works for you, which it's lame, I know. And what I mean by that is figure out a plan, for lack of a better word, a strategy that works for you, that meets your need that you're trying to fulfill through this transition or change. So for me, I'm a big spreadsheet girl. Anytime I got to make something happen, whether it was moving from DC to Colorado or quitting my attorney job to start my own business, big spreadsheet. I even printed off an 18-month calendar and put sticky notes all over it so that I knew exactly what I needed to do, when I needed to do it in order to quit my job and start my business. That works for me. Ain't gonna work for all of you. Some of you hear plan and you cringe because you want to keep it a little more fluid. So figure out the system, the strategy that might work best for you and experiment. If something doesn't work, try something else. As you're doing that, tie that plan or that strategy to your values, to your growth mindset, so that you can figure out what's really going to feel best for you. Because when we're facing change or when we've had change happen to us, there's a lot that's like up in the air, swirling around. And if we can sort of bring all of that down out of the cloud, get it on paper, get it on some sticky notes, a spreadsheet, calendar, whatever you want, it can help get us out of that uncertainty and the overwhelm of just having everything out there. We can actually see it. We can get our arms around it. So writing it down, what your plan or your strategy is, what the values are that you're going to honor, what the growth mindsets are that you're going to use, can be very helpful to let you see it concrete, real terms. If there's a change that you're trying to make, it can help to have a particular goal or a time frame in mind that you're going to make that. Like, this is just basic common sense coaching, right? Like, what's your goal? What's your time frame? If you're looking at a change, something that has happened to you, like being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease or an illness, or maybe you've lost your job, so you're trying to adjust, shift your relationship to that change, you're not going to have necessarily a concrete time frame or particular goal. You might have something that looks like in 6 months from now, I want to be someone who wakes up more grateful. Right now, I'm waking up dreading my days and barely able to get out of bed. In 6 months, I want to be able to wake up with gratitude. That's the first thing on my heart. So having something that you're moving toward, whether it's a time frame, a particular goal, a feeling, experience that you want to have, writing that down too. The key is to make it something that's measurable. So it's not just, I want to feel better in 6 months. How are you going to know if you feel better? How are you even going to notice? Like, what are you comparing, contrasting that against? So you want to make that goal or time frame or experience or feeling something you can measure. So it's not, I want to feel better in 6 months. It could be, I want to be able to walk up a flight of stairs in 6 months. Or I want to be able to wake up and have my pain be a 5 out of 10 instead of an 8 out of 10. So figure out what plan works best for you and make that something measurable. Now we get to step 6. And this is where we start to look at what are the tiny shifts or transitions that I want to make. Because you've taken everything, you've put it all down on paper, right? You've taken all the things that you want to do, that you need to do, all the things to make this change happen. And that can look and feel very overwhelming. All you ever need to do, and this is why we have step 6, is to focus on the first thing right in front of you. But how do I determine that first thing when I have 50 things on my list of all the things that I need to do in my plan and my spreadsheet to make this change happen? How do I pick one? This is where you come back to your values and the growth mindset. Pick one step, one small shift, 1 degree that you can make that honors your values and that allows you to take a step into that growth mindset. So for example, when I was planning with my big sticky note calendar to leave my government job and start my own business, it was a lot. There was a lot on it, a lot of sticky notes. How did I pick which one to do first? Well, I kind of knew from my plan that I needed 50 million things done. So I backed it up from there in terms of how much time I needed to do all those things, like how much time each thing was going to take, backed it all the way up. Okay, that's not for everybody. That's just some intense planning that works for me. But I knew, okay, what that meant was first thing I needed to do was graduate from my coaching program. Breaking that up even more, that means that each week I needed to watch 2 videos, which meant on Wednesday, I need to watch my first video, right? Like it got that small. This is why you want to have a sense for what your plan or your strategy is so that you can break it up into the small shifts, the small 1 degree transitions, so that you know what is the first immediate thing in front of me. And so with my coaching program, I was watching a video, say on Wednesday, and I was able to do that because I knew if I completed my coaching program, it would honor my value of freedom that I wanted to have. And it allowed me to say, okay, I am learning how to be a coach. By watching this one video, I am learning how to be a coach. So this is really the part that a lot of people struggle with is I can't just put one thing down. I don't know where to start. Remember what I said last week about 1 degree. 1 degree makes all the difference. 1 step, 1 tiny shift makes all the difference. So write down the first thing right in front of you that you want to do. And then if you want to put some other things beyond that, you can do that. If that starts to feel overwhelming, each day, just focus on, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing in front of me today? Or in this moment, or in this hour? What's the next thing? And keep it that small. Because again, we're addressing uncertainty. When you have just the next thing in front of you, as opposed to 10 things in front of you, there's less uncertainty to deal with. If you got 10 things in front of you, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of potential cognitive dissonance or identity dissonance or change. Remember, the smaller you can make that step, the less uncertainty and the less dissonance that there is. Now, the 7th step, again, pretty basic coaching here, but how are you going to be accountable for that? How are you actually going to make that step? Some people are just self-motivated, and that's great. That's you're internally accountable. Other people need some more external accountability. So that can look like reaching out to a friend or a loved one or a coach. Hey, I'm here for you. to help hold you accountable and say, hey, I'm doing this thing. By tomorrow at 5 o'clock, I want to have taken this step. Can you check in with me, or can I check in with you and let you know if I've done that? It's that simple. I'm checking in with a friend right now every day. I ask her if she would be my accountability buddy because there's some statements, things I'm trying to read to help with my mindset that I want to read 3 times a day for 21 days. And so I ask, can you help hold me accountable? Can I just shoot you a thumbs up text every morning to let you know if I did that the day before? It's that easy. You can also help hold yourself accountable by either some positive reinforcement or some negative reinforcement. What I mean by that is some people find it helpful to be accountable by saying, well, if I take this step, or if I take these 5 steps, whatever it might be, then I will treat myself to a massage, go to the spa, go for a hike. That can be some positive reinforcement. Some negative reinforcement could be if I don't do those things, if I don't take this next step, I have to donate $5 to a charity that I hate. Now, that is negative. That's heavy. It's not my first recommended go-to. And for some people, that's what they need in order to conjure up that internal motivation, is that they need to know if they don't do it, there's some real consequences to pay. So reflect on, how have you best taken action in the past? Do you have internal motivation? Do you need some external support? What's that look like for you? But create some accountability around that first step that you're going to take. And then the 8th step is so important. And it's one that a lot of Gen Xers are going to struggle with. It's one I struggle with. And it's to reward and celebrate the shit out of yourself for taking that step or the 5 steps. Set up some type of reward and celebration system for yourself. Let me explain why this is so important and why it's not a bunch of cheesy bullshit. We have something called the negativity bias. It's how our brains are hardwired. We're hardwired to scan our environment for danger, to try and keep ourselves safe. Back in the day, it helped keep us safe from saber-toothed tigers and be able to find food so that our family didn't starve to death. Nowadays, that negativity bias has gotten hijacked because we see danger and threats everywhere. Everywhere we look, around the corner, on social media, on the news, and colleagues, everywhere is negative, threat, threat, threat. That negativity bias is very powerful because, as Dr. Rick Hanson, who's a neuroscientist and mindfulness meditation practitioner, explains, our brains are like Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive. Meaning we will latch on to negative experiences like crazy, and the positive ones will go unnoticed or like slide right off. So we actually want to work the muscle of noticing the positive, because when you are noticing more positive, you're going to want and crave more positive. Okay, what we want to bring into our lives, we actually have to develop the capacity to want to bring it in, to create that space to bring it in. And if you are someone who is just constantly looking for the negatives, you're not going to be able to bring in the growth and the change that you want to bring in. So it's vitally important that we train ourselves to acknowledge the progress, the growth, the wins that we have in our life, because that will want us to create more progress and growth and wins. So when you take your first step, or if you want to make it when you take the first 5 steps, whatever it is, make it something that is fairly contemporaneous. Don't wait for a year to celebrate yourself, or 6 months even. Make it something fairly contemporaneous where if I do the thing, I'm going to celebrate myself. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to, every time you do something, go out to a 6-course all-you-can-eat buffet, right? Maybe all you can eat isn't 6 courses. But you don't have to eat the whole gallon of ice cream or drink a margarita, right? Like, find a healthy way to support yourself or to celebrate yourself. And again, that can look like reaching out to your accountability buddy and saying, hey, yay, I did the thing. Like, it can be that simple. It doesn't have to be a big party or a big, festival. It can be something so simple as, yeah, fuck yeah, I did the thing. Like, pat myself on the back, good on me. I know it sounds cheesy. Just do it. Just do it. What do you have to lose? Really. What you might think you have to lose is that you're going to become one of those people who thinks you need a cookie or a medal just for getting out of bed in the morning. Not saying that. Don't talk yourself out of the celebration because you're afraid the pendulum is going to swing too far and you're going to celebrate every single little thing you do, which, by the way, what the fuck is wrong with that? But we're not swinging the pendulum that far. We're coming to an equilibrium state here. Most Gen Xers, most people of our generation do not celebrate and acknowledge themselves enough, let alone at all. So you could stand a little more self-celebration and acknowledgement. So if you take that first step, when you take that first step, say, yay, me, this is awesome. I'm going to give myself like a 5-minute nap or a nice walk, or I'm going to have that special treat that I never allow myself to have, right? Like that will build that positivity so that you crave more of that reward, more of that positivity. And so it also helps to remind you that, oh yeah, I can take that step. I can do the thing. It builds evidence for yourself to remember that, oh yeah, I can lean into that fear. So the celebration is the final and key element of being able to make these shifts and transitions so that you can face and move through these bigger changes in life with a little more awareness and ease, and honestly, with more confidence and courage and clarity. That's why I say that at the beginning of this podcast is we're looking to find more confidence, courage, and clarity to make these shifts, to face these big changes that we have coming at us at lightning speed. Because I know it can feel like the universe is just crumbling around us. Like everything is coming at us at once. Can I please just get off this fucking merry-go-round? So this is where you need to come back to a mindfulness practice, to focus on the present moment with as little judgment as possible, to be kind to yourself, to recognize that, yeah, this sucks. There's a lot happening right now. It's a lot. And I can be here for myself. Like I'm going to do something nice for myself. I'm going to just acknowledge that this is a hard thing. And I'm going to tap into what's important to me. What's my why? What are the values that I want to honor? What motivates me? And then I'm going to embrace that growth mindset. I'm going to recognize I'm in my comfort zone right now. It's really scary outside of that. And with a growth mindset, I am learning how to XYZ. And then you're going to look, once you're in that kind of resourced place, you're going to look at, okay, what are all the things I need to accomplish? What's the strategy? What's the plan? Let's get it all down on paper. Let's figure out how we're going to sort of measure things, make them objectively digestible. I can actually see what needs to be done. And then what is right in front of me? What can I do right now in this moment, right in the next moment, whatever it might be, that 1 degree. Let's just focus on that. Let's eliminate as much uncertainty, as much cognitive dissonance and identity dissonance or change as we can by focusing on the one thing. And then let me reach out to a friend, a coach, whoever it might be, and say, hey, I'm doing this thing. Can you kind of keep an eye on me? Help me keep on track. And then when I do the thing, I'm going to celebrate the shit out of myself. And then you know what? Keep repeating it. It can sound tedious. And this is why we practice doing these kinds of steps, is because pretty soon it just becomes like rote memory, like you're just muscle memory doing it and you don't even realize that you're doing it. You don't even realize that, oh, I made this decision because freedom or financial stability or kindness is really important to me. It just becomes a way that you move in the world, again, with more consciousness and awareness. You start to build that muscle of confidence in yourself because you can look back and say, hey, that thing was really scary and I did it. That has built some confidence. It's given me some courage. And I have clarity because I know everything that needs to be done. I know what this picture looks like. And I have clarity on just the first thing in front of me that I need to do. And that feels more so. Okay, how you feeling? That was a lot. And it's not a lot, really. As I said, when we start to integrate these practices, they start to just become part of who we are and how we move in the world. Please remember to check out the show notes because I'll reference a lot of what I talked about, including the free Inner Compass, the Core Values audio series. The guidebook will be in there, so you don't have to worry about remembering all these steps. You can print that off, go through them on your own time. And as I said, hey, reach out to me. I help people be accountable. It's part of what I do. And if you have any of those obstacles coming up, you notice the uncertainty, the cognitive dissonance, this is who I want to be, but this is who I am now. I'm not sure how to reconcile these, or the identity dissonance. Remember that these obstacles are a natural part of change. If change was easy, we'd just be doing it left and right all the time. And we are. We just don't notice it. Remember, as I talked about in episode 17, we are undergoing tiny shifts and transitions all the time in this moment, right now, as you're listening and as I'm talking. Cells in us are dying, are regenerating. We are physically transitioning and changing in every moment. We just don't notice it. The clouds outside, the weather outside, the sun is changing and transitioning right now. We just don't notice it right now in this moment. So if we can find ways to shift our perspective on what change is and what we find to be acceptable or unacceptable change, we might actually see that we can move through it or face it with more confidence, courage, and clarity. Thanks for tuning in this week. Again, please like, share, leave a review, and comment on this episode. Let me know how this landed for you, what's coming up for you. And always feel free to send me an email at podcast@lifefromthesummit.com. And until next time, stay gold, Gen Xers.